in the different aspects of what the community needs to learn. This is one of the formats that we would like to encourage everyone to participate in and encourage to spread this to other centers as well. And the topic of our discussion for today is the future of our faith in America. As we know that whenever we consider something a priority, we plan for it far into the future. So if we want financial stability, we want housing stability, we want education for ourselves or for the youth, or we plan for our retirement, we plan well ahead, decades ahead, to make sure that we take care of these things before they arrive. So we have to ask ourselves a few questions in this regard. Do we dedicate the same type of consideration for the future of our faith, for the future of our religion? Do we think that Islam in America will look like it does today in 50 or 100 years? What's going to happen to our religion in a few generations to come? Do we set any long-term goals for ourselves as far as our religion, and do we allocate significant resources in the short term to work for those goals? These are important questions we have to ask for ourselves, and today's discussion is intended to be a starting point for this conversation. So we can't take for granted that the state of our faith and that of the next generations is going to stay the same. Everything changes over time, and so does the way that Islam is accepted. And there are many influences that will shape the way that Muslims believe about Islam and the way that they practice Islam. And we're not able to cover every one of those related issues in one event, and even the topics that we have chosen for today, as you see listed on the screen, even these will not be exhausted today, but we need to start somewhere, and the best start is to educate ourselves on the different aspects of this topic. We must understand our responsibility towards Islam. Individual person has as a responsibility towards those goals. So, for example, we should start thinking beyond the short term. So instead of just thinking about what are we going to do next Muharram or next Ramadan, we should be thinking about the Muharram and the Ramadan of the next generation or the generation after that. So the future of our faith largely depends on the four factors being discussed today: the role of the family, the role of the community, the role of the Islamic centers, and the role of the clergy. And each of our guest scholars here today will speak on these topics in relation to the future of Islam. And the way that today's discussion will proceed is that each of our speakers will give a short talk on that topic, and then the audience members will have, you brothers and sisters, will have a chance to ask them questions on that topic. So there will be a presentation, and then a short Q&A with each presentation, and then after all four presentations, we'll have a general, longer Q&A, and then we'll have the closing statements from our panelists, inshallah. And of course, when we ask our questions, we ask the brothers and sisters to please, going around with pens and note cards, you can ask them, and if you want to ask your question on the microphone, of course the microphone will also be passed around. And if you're going to ask your question on the microphone, please, we ask that you keep your questions very short and keep them to the point and on topic. And we want to answer as many questions as possible, so make sure that you have your question prepared beforehand, and if possible, please do not engage in dialogue with the panelists, because we want to have as many questions asked as possible. And of course, refreshments, coffee, tea, water is all available in the back. You can have that at any time. And we ask the brothers and sisters, please, if you're going to have side discussions, please take it out in the hall, because even if you're very far from us, the panelists can hear you, and that might disrupt the discussion. So one of the aspects that is very important to the future of Islam is that the youth must have a very strong connection with the Quran. So with that in mind, we're going to start our program today with recitation of Quran by our sister Saadia Bayat. So let us welcome her with a loud and generous salawat, please.
أعوذ
Now we're going to begin with our first presentation by Sheikh Ali Raza Alavi. So we ask him to please, inshallah, begin his presentation. Let's welcome him with a loud salawat, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا. Respected Ayatollah, respected scholars of Hawza Ilmiya, respected brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In a time when Islamophobia is at its peak, in a time where it seems as if having Iman is a fantasy, in a time where believing in Allah or getting closer to Allah is considered a weakness, in these crucial times, what are the roles of our families? There are four major roles that I will mention today. The first one is ta'aleem, the second one is ghiza, the third one is mahol, the atmosphere, and the fourth one is the guidance. But before I mention these, I would like to go into detail and explain what a family is. The Arabic word for family is usra, and it is derived from the words denoting unity, the closeness, and the protection of your loved ones. Now the question is, protection from what? And then I will get into detail when I move along. The word refers to a group of people who are united, who stay together as loved ones, as brothers, or as parents, or as cousins, or whatever that might be. Unfortunately, in our communities, we have a major problem, and this major problem is overconfidence. Some of the individuals, they go around and they say, because we belong to this family, or because I am a part of this family, I do not need Islam, or I do not need to go to the Husayniyas, or I do not need to do work on my children or my family. So the answer to that is your family more holier than the family of Adam? What happened to Adam? Hazrat Adam's first son. He killed his brother. And in that time, Shaitan didn't have technology, or Shaitan didn't have social media, or any of the tools or the utilities that he has today. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. So as I was saying, the family shapes the individual, both woman and man. It builds the values nourished by the guidance and supportance and enlightenment. Now the four that I mentioned, the first was ta'aleem. We give our children the education. We want them to go to the best colleges, universities, have a fixed salary. Why? So they can have a stable income, so there are no worries in the future. But at the same time, are we giving our kids the ta'aleem of the imams? Are we teaching our children or our family members how the imams lived? Are we giving them the ta'aleem of Quran? Are we giving them the lessons that we have learned from Karbala, or the lessons that we have learned from Abu Abdullah? Are we putting in the effort that we put in to the normal education, or are we not? The second role of the family is ghiza, the food. What is your brother or sister eating? Is he or she going out and eating the haram foods? What are your children eating? What are your family members eating? Yes. For example, if someone eats haram all day long and all year long, it will be a difficult task for him to come to a dua kumayl. Or it will be a difficult task for him to join a majlis or join anything in the Husayniyah, because all of that food, the haram food, has been built up in his stomach so much that it will not allow him to do so. And the best example of that is when Imam Hussein was leaving to Karbala. The Imam Hussein, he told the people, you know who I am. You know I am the son of Fatima. You know I am the son of Ali. And you know who my grandfather is. And they responded, because we have eaten so much haram, because our stomachs are full of haram, there is no way that we will turn back. So making sure what kind of food our family members are eating. That was the second role. The third role is the mahol, the atmosphere, the environment. What environment are you creating in your house? Is your house from the morning till night filled with music? Or is your house filled with the recitation of Quran? Yes. When you travel to work or wherever you go, are you playing CDs of haram things, of musical instruments or anything? Or is there du'as going around in your background? If you can control the environment, if you can control the mahol, you can control your family members. For example, let's say you have a household A. In that household, from the morning till night, there's nothing religious going on in there. Everything they are doing is haram. In that household, the person living there, the children being there, the husband and the wife being there, they will not become as religious as they want. Why? Because of the atmosphere. So what do we have to do? We have to create the environment in our families. Make sure we go and take our children to the Islamic institutes. Make sure you know what your children are doing. Make sure they are doing their Islamic duties. The fourth role that I will mention today is the role of guidance. Are you guiding your son or your daughter or your brother or your other family members like the way you guide them in life? For example, some people love to guide their children, oh, become a doctor, become an engineer, or I want you to do this, I want you to do this or go into this field. Are we doing the same as we are doing with that aspect? Are we doing it in the Islamic aspect? Are we telling our children, oh, I want you to finish this much part of the Quran? Or are you asking your kids, where were you? I didn't see you in the Husayniyah today. I didn't see you in the mosque tonight. Where were you? Are we guiding our children or our family members, or are we not? Yes. In conclusion, I will end with these marks. We are all on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. We are all on the right path. Some of us are running, some of us are jogging, some of us are crawling, some of us are on the wheelchair, going towards the right path. While doing so, what is the job of those who are running? For example, you have Mr. A. He is always doing his Islamic duties. He is always taking care of wherever he has to be. He knows he has to be at a certain place at a certain time. Now that person that he is jogging, what is his job? He needs to help those family members or community members that are struggling with their Islam, or they are struggling with their Iman. Yes? Let us not get our negligence in the way, and let us help all of our family members and brothers and sisters in the community. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So you brothers and sisters have any questions? You can write your questions down at any time and send them up, or you can ask one of the volunteers to bring you a microphone. You can ask your question directly. So until the brothers and sisters formulate your questions, I have my own question for you. So one of the things that comes up is the difference between the society of one generation versus the society of the previous generation. So today's youth are the product of a society. Let's say by youth I mean like elementary, high school, college age, and so forth. They're the product of a society that's more technologically advanced than ever before and is more socially progressive than it ever has been. On the other hand, their parents and grandparents are from previous, less advanced, less technologically advanced, less socially progressive generations. So shouldn't the parents of these youth take a step back and allow today's advanced and progressive society to raise and guide their children? Isn't what is more modern better than what existed in previous generations? How would we respond to this? You can answer, anyone can answer, inshallah.
Repeat the question.
Sure. The question basically says that the youth of today are the product of a much better society, more technologically advanced, more socially progressive, more aware. So shouldn't the parents give more of the responsibility of raising and guiding the children to the society, and the parents should take a step back because they're not as advanced as the society itself is? How would we respond to this question or this suggestion?
The answer to that is yes and no. Yes, we know the youth, they are a little bit ahead of those, our seniors, as we call them, in the society of technology-wise. But in Islam, the respect still stays there. Yes. For example, let's say you have Mr. A, let's say he didn't go to school and he is an illiterate man, and his son becomes a doctor. Does that mean that that son can overtake and overpower his father? No. Islam goes against that. And there are many examples in Islam which shows that what happens if you go against your parents. The best example that I can think of is Prophet Nuh and his son. When his son was on top of the mountains, the Prophet said, "Come with me and I will save you." What did he say? He said, "No, I believe this is the safest point on earth." What happened? He drowned and he died. That is the best example I can give.
If I could modify the question, maybe one of our other panelists could answer. If we could modify it in this way. It will be a question of modern education versus previous education. For example, quality education, secular education is so widely available that today's youth are smarter than ever and more secularly educated than their parents. So shouldn't the future of Islam be left to those who are, quote unquote, more educated?
Ahsant. I would just like to add to what Sheikh was saying. While it is the responsibility of the parents to provide the initial guidance, but as we see that they themselves are not well equipped to do so. Therefore, this responsibility should be shared amongst them as well as the community centers or those institutions which are capable of doing such a job. Yes, they may be technologically advanced, they may have attained higher education, secular education, but the fact that they are not well equipped in the Islamic education, and therefore the concept may be just this ta'aleem is not enough, because what Islam provides is tarbiyat, and therefore the concept of both of these things together. So yes, it should be left to those alongside with the initial institution, which is the house of the insan, yeah, where you're born. That's where your first education is done. But if they're not themselves too Islamic, I don't like to use this word, that I'm not Islamic. A lot of people said, I'm not really that religious. Well, you're either religious or not. So it doesn't really mean that I'm not that religious. Well, you know, I pray occasionally. So when that sort of situation occurs, this definitely should be left to. Alhamdulillah, there are well-qualified institutions, centers, community centers, religious personalities who should be trusted with this task.
So when we say society, should we make a difference between giving responsibility to the Muslim community, the Muslim Islamic institutions versus the secular institutions? Do we make a differentiation between the two? Bismillah, please.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is a very important question, actually, before going into the answer, with the permission of the respected ulama in this panel. We tend to think that this word secular is something that is harmful, harmless and neutral. But when we look closely into it, secular is just another name for irreligious or kufr. Either a person has deen or a person does not have deen. So the secular institutions are what promotes not having deen and a lifestyle that is far and not based on religion. If we can keep that in mind, then that solves a lot of issues, problems, and answers a lot of questions. That, yes, there may be a certain higher level of secular education, but that does not guarantee a religious upbringing, religious success, religious education. In addition to keeping in mind the role of a secular education and its objective, and its main objective is to seclude you from something. What is that seclusion? Religion. When we understand this concept and we pay more attention to it, then we realize, okay, if we have to go through this type of education, we must complement it, and complement it very strongly with a religious education, because on one side the secular education works day in and day out to pull you away from religion. So therefore, the medication for that, or we should say the solution for that, or one of the solutions, is that we have a proper religious education next to that. Of course, the most important place for that is in the home, and especially during the early years. However, as it was alluded, that nowadays with technology, a lot of the youth may be a little more religiously advanced or have more religious information than their parents and their elders. So this is not something new. Throughout the history of Islam, the tradition has been that if the parents are unable to meet the religious needs of their children, especially the religious education, that they should take them, and they're responsible to take them to Islamic teachers and Islamic centers and institutions. Inshallah, if we keep these basics in mind, hopefully we can overcome these issues and problems.
Do we have any questions from the audience yet? Just one more follow-up question, then we'll move on to the next presentation, inshallah. Since you were talking in your presentation about ta'aleem and education, we know, and especially the brothers and sisters who are involved in the management of the Islamic centers, they know that when they have these Saturday and Sunday schools and Islamic classes, that some families bring their children and youth to the Islamic center for these classes and some don't. So we ask, can the average family, the average Muslim family in America provide an Islamic education at home? Do they have the necessary resources where they can give that Islamic guidance at home without having to bring them to the Islamic centers?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, there are online education these days. Even the students of Najaf and Qum, they are teaching online. They teach theology, they teach also the Quranic sciences and jurisprudence. It's not necessary to bring your children to Sunday school because that is not even enough. Sunday school is not enough. If you can arrange at least 3 days a week, that will make some difference. They are spending more time in misguidance and they are spending very less time in guidance. I encourage to bring your children to the Sunday school and Saturday schools. Even we can open Friday schools, one day for theology, one day for jurisprudence, and one day for ethical values. But if you cannot bring your children to the Sunday schools, you may arrange the online education and training by the qualified clergies and clerics, not unqualified one. Thank you.
What advice would you give to certain families who they neither bring their children to the Islamic Center and they don't take advantage of the online resources either? They assume that just living as they do every day and taking care of the basic daily necessities is enough to secure their moral future. What advice would you give to them where they don't take advantage of any of these Islamic resources?
This is very dangerous practice. As Sheikh Ali said, if you go in history and see the examples, son of Adam al-Islam was misguided. After that much good atmosphere, good education, good training, good family background, and son of Nuh al-Islam got misguided. After that much guidance which he got, I believe those families who are not arranging the education or training online and they are not bringing their children to the Sunday schools or to the congregations, their generation will be lost.
Thank you very much. I would really ask Sayyid Adwan Rizvi, inshallah, to give his presentation on the role of the community in the future of Islam. Let's welcome him with a loud salawat, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على أما بعد فقال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The verse that I chose to recite was the verse that Sheikh Ali recited from Surah Tahrim, verse number 6. So last minute I changed the verse of this Surah Asr, which we are all very much familiar with. My talk, inshallah, I'll try to fit it in within 15 minutes. If I go over a few minutes, I apologize in advance. First of all, I'd like to commend Sayyid Atiq for this phenomenal initiative of having such programs where you can bring the communities out of the normal majalis aza or the festivities, the jashan and whatnot. And to have a dialogue, to be able to ask and have an interactive session. Whereas usually a lot of time, nothing wrong with the majalis and aza, and as we are approaching the month of Muharram, but it's usually, one-way talk. And here, alhamdulillah, the audience will have the opportunity to ask their questions and to be able to get a deeper understanding. And also keeping the focus on one particular subject rather than being sporadic and having talked about numerous things. So my discussion is the role of the community in the future of the Shia faith in the United States. So communities are recognized by centers or ethnicities, fortunately or unfortunately. You say, well, this is the Shia community of Afghans, or the Shia community of the Indo-Paks, or the Pakistanis, or the Indians, or the Iranis, or the Arabs, or particular places where they come from. Nothing wrong with that, but when we speak from that reference, usually a community is recognized by that geographical location that you live in. So for example, I was coming from Central Jersey, you would say, well, I belong to the Central Jersey community. Most of you who live over here, you belong to the South Jersey community. People who come from other places, you got the idea. So that's one thing. Now coming to the discussion of the basic question of what is the future of Islam in America, I think that has to be addressed as a whole. And inshallah, we'll try and get to the specific part that has been given to me. While living in the present, we do not see the future, or we have a vague idea of what the future holds for us. But we are concerned about the future, as whatever we do now will affect our future. So it's very important. We're not the first wave of Muslims who have come to this country. There have been at least 2 or 3 different waves of Muslims who have come before us, and they were not able to establish Islam or the Islamic community for whatever reasons. The first wave of Muslims came or were brought in as slaves from Africa 200 years ago. And we know that they could not establish themselves as Muslim as a whole in the community because they were oppressed. They were brought in chains and left on plantations in total slavery. Their religion was changed, their names were changed, their social structure was broken. They were not allowed to practice their religion, and we do not blame them for not having done enough or to be able to establish an Islamic community because, obviously, of their given situation. The second wave that came was after World War I, from the Balkan states and Lebanon to what used to be the Ottoman Empire. These Muslims were settled mostly in the Midwest states, or the locations such as Dearborn, Toledo, Chicago, and Detroit. They were again more concerned at the time in establishing themselves economically and socially. Religion was not the first thing on their minds. They melted away in the melting pot. We must also learn from lessons from the past of the glorious Muslim empire of Andalusia or Spain. For 700 years, Muslims ruled that country, but they were wiped out after the Inquisition. In Spain, they created a class structure of Muslims of Arab descent, the Berbers, and the native Spaniards. And these classes did not live on an equal basis. And this was against Islam. Second, they were not able to practice Islam collectively, but more individually. Whereas Islam is a religion that has to be practiced collectively in congregation. And only then is the social fabric is established. A thread by itself is not a nation. So, just a single thread. Third, Islamic education on an individual level was not there. There were more emphasis on secular and technological or technical education. Fourth, too much emphasis was given to culture. And we see some shades of that today in our individual communities and societies as well. Whether in the form of art, music, dress, food, but not enough on defense. Although culture is necessary for the survival of the soul, defense is necessary for the survival of the body. One cannot live without the other. Finally, the most important reason that these civilizations were destroyed was that they failed to invite others to Islam. We think that and that's the reason I chose that ayat. وَالْعَصْرَ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. That indeed, all of mankind is at loss, except those who bring iman, faith, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and those who act righteously. But there are two more things that God mentions. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. This tawasaw in last two of these things means that you invite others, and you do this in congregation. And Islam is not a religion which is that I save myself. So the ayat that Shaykh Ali had recited, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ, that you safeguard yourself as well as your family. So that is your duty. While discussing the future of Islam in America, we must examine the parameters of a good future. If we judge the future by numbers, yes, it is true that the number of Muslims has tremendously increased in the recent past. Half a century ago, there were not more than 50,000 Muslims, and now there are around, they say, 6 million or more or less. Nevertheless, if you look at the world map, the number of Muslims in the world is over 1 billion. But however, there hardly have any strength in that number. A 1.6 billion number, what is the strength of the Muslims in the world? It is the quality of Muslims that is important, rather than the number itself. The quality of Muslims who were in minority and outnumbered in the Battle of Badr by 3-1, but they were able to succeed with conviction. If you look at the number, or if you look at the number by the number of mosques and minarets, yes, it is true that have been, constant increase in number of community centers and the masajid that have been built. In the 1969 or the 70s, there were not more than 50 mosques in the country. And I'm not even speaking about, our Shia mosques. And now there are over 1,400, according to one consensus, mosques. However, unless we have a social structure to protect the mosques, these buildings by themselves cannot defend themselves. Although our number is very small to those, or very similar to those of Jewish people in this country, we have no comparison in strength in terms of economic, political, and educational strength. We do not have nearly enough congressmen or senators. We do not control university boards or faculties. We do not have a single factory or financial institution which is able to employ Muslims in large numbers. Many of the Muslims are embroiled in preserving their ethnic culture, but this ethnic culture, whether in the form of social parties, dress shows, music shows, other things for presentation, is nothing but a passing show. After this generation of Muslims has passed away, our children and youth of immigrant parents will not be able to sustain that ethnic culture. There will be only two cultures left for Muslims, the Islamic culture and the American culture. It is true that our family and our youth are our future. Shaykh Ali talked about the importance of family. I'll briefly shed some light on the youth aspect of it. Muslim elders, scholars, writers, and leaders of the present generations are now maybe in their 40s and 50s. In the next 20 to 30 years, this generation, which is bearing the task of trying to establish Islam, will pass away. Unless we have created a new grassroots leadership which will replace us, there will be a vacuum. Therefore, to establish our future, we must establish the Muslim youth. Our fear is that it is possible that many of our Muslim youth will be lost to the community by one way or another. The reasons for that fear are as such. I'll highlight 3 specific features. The United States is a melting pot. The heat is enough of the social peer pressure that people do not do get melted down in their values. They get lost. They may not be able to preserve their Islamic identity and outlook the way it should be in a pure form. And that's something which I'm sure those of you who've been in this country for 15, 20, 30, 40 years, you have seen it. Number two, the second fear is that they're being lost with intermarriages. Unless we encourage Muslim youth to marry only Muslims when they reach the age and make that decision, it is possible that future generations may be lost. Something which, rarely is highlighted. Although it is permissible for a Muslim man to marry non-Muslim or people of the Kitab, Ahl Kitab, with certain conditions, there are several problems that are related to this. Unless his wife becomes a practicing Muslim, the future of the children and their children to remain Muslim is not guaranteed. If there is a divorce in the family, which does happen frequently, then the custody of the child in the United States goes to the mother, who will remain a Jew or a Christian or Ahl Kitab. More important, the question is that what will happen to Muslim girls if all the Muslim boys are marrying the Ahl Kitab? And therefore, Muslim women are not allowed to marry non-Muslim men. Therefore, development and maintenance of intact Muslim families is the key to the survival of our faith in this country. And the third concern about youth is regarding their education. I think this was also highlighted in the questions that were asked. I'm not talking only of secular education, which was very eloquently explained by Sayyidina, rather Islamic education. Parents have this attitude to drop their kids off at Sunday school and for it to provide a full Islamic education. Maulana also highlighted that aspect. In 2 or 4 hours a week, we cannot counteract the 40 hours of secular education and secular ideas. How do you imagine? Therefore, Sunday schools with the lack of funds and resources are not able to do the right job either. With the lack of true education, our outlook about these issues may change, and we may develop an attitude that there's nothing wrong in this, and as often is the case with many of our youth, that they question, what's wrong with this if I'm doing this? As there's no mention in Quran of such issues, so right away the question, where does it say this in Quran? Where does it say that it is not allowed in Quran? And obviously not everything will be found by you and I in Quran, because Quran is not a book of tafasil, explanations in details. It's, it gives you bullet points. It gives you, actually, in fact, if you look at the ahkam, there are only 500 ayat, correct me if I'm wrong, which talk about the ahkam. And therefore, you won't find every single answer to your, things that you do in Quran. So therefore, this acceptance of certain practices and values of the society, unless it is confirmed by the Quran and the Sunnah, will become part of Islam, or at least of the practicing habit of the people. This is how cultural Islam develops. Thus, we must emphasize in-depth, basic education for all Muslim youth, irrespective of their family background, whether their parents have been practicing or not practicing, or what their socio-economic structure is, in order to develop a nation of truly believing and practicing Muslims who have knowledge of Islam and are practicing Islam in order to preserve it. Our love for our family should not reflect only in providing for them all the worldly amenities like clothing, food, house, car, TV, video games, etc. But more importantly, safeguarding their future in both worlds. All you will believe, save yourselves and your family from a fire. In this regard, Islam and the education of Muslim women is a matter of prime importance. The first school for a Muslim child is going to be his or her own. And the first teacher would be in the form of the father or the mother. The present-day Muslim adults are living in isolation, not being part of the mainstream American society. We hope that Muslim youth who are born and raised in this society will be able to mix with non-Muslims with conviction, maintaining their own identity in order to offer solutions for the country in which they are born. Society as such is on a decline because of its moral decay and breakup of the social fabric. We hope that Islam in its pure form, with the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, when practiced by a large number of Americans, will be able to save America and us Muslims in America from such decay by offering a viable social alternative. I'll conclude with this line. The future of Islam is not at stake, but that of those who profess to be its followers is at stake. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Any questions yet from the audience? Would anyone like to voice a question, please? Just raise your hand, please. Can someone bring forward the microphone, please? Good job,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a very enlightening speech. The only little problem I had with that, it was mostly negative. You scared us. I am 70-some years old. You mentioned that when the old people die and everything is going to vanish, there are some also good news.
Yes.
There are some good news which encourage the community that keep doing it. Number two, my question, second question is, what you as a leader are doing? What are you doing for us? The Marajid, I don't know, the scholar and the people that are serving the community. Thank you.
Inshallah, Maulana will have an entire discussion on the role of the clergy. So I think a lot of you, the question about what is the role and what the religious leaders are doing, that will be answered over there. So I don't want to say anything which will overlap, or obviously his ideas will be extraordinary. But it was not undermining what the previous people have done. It was, when we look at our state today and we're looking in the future, have we been able to transfer or safely, pass this baton to the next generation? You came from back home, where you heard the sound of Adhan 5 times a day. You were brought up in some sort of, even if your family, let's say, was not too much into deen, but at least the environment was there to protect. Whereas the children, like myself, who grew up over here, we did not have that environment. And therefore, it was just that much more difficult. So therefore, the role of community centers, which yourself and people like yourself have established, is actually something which is safeguarding the youth and the future of them. So yes, it's not undermining what was not done by them. It is more so, are the youth who have been, for example, provided this platform by yourself, like yourself, are they going to be able to continue this and be able to pass this to their second or third generations? I think that was the aspect of it. I also wanted to, well, if there are more questions, then I'll get into it.
Inshallah, Maulana will address that issue in his discussion, inshallah. I would also like to ask, since we're talking about the Islamic community, any question that I ask always has several follow-up questions with it. So the first one would be, since we're talking about the Islamic community and we're trying to have a very honest and candid discussion, and sometimes the answers that are given, unfortunately, like the doctor mentioned, are a little bit negative, but sometimes we need, as a good doctor knows, as a doctor, you have to sometimes give bad news to a patient in order to help them fix their problem. So, as a Muslim community, well, I have to preface it, are we at a good place as an Islamic, as a Muslim community? And if not, what are some markers that would be the sign that we are moving towards what we would consider if not an ideal, but at least a good, functioning, healthy, successful Muslim community? What would be some markers that we should work for, some signs that you would say that we're getting to that point?
And I would like to ask the other panelists to also jump in. I think we have many examples in front of us. A functioning center that caters for all the needs of every individual in the society. The reason I began by, how we're divided, it's not a bad division. If you say, well, this is the Afghan center, this is the Iranian center, this is the, Arab center or Indo-Pak. This community center should have multifaceted or it should be able to cover, many dimensions. For example, mosque as a place of education, mosque as a place of worship, Islamic center or Islamic community center as a place of receiving dignitaries and delegates, as a place of charity distribution, a shelter for homeless, place of hosting festivities, majalis. All of these are amongst the roles of an Islamic institution or Islamic community center. And I think there are many such centers that exist that we can look up to that are doing all of that. Some with limited resources, some with enough resources are able to undertake all of these tasks. Some may not be able to undertake all of these tasks. But in all, yes, there are examples that are in front of us.
That would be an example of an Islamic center. But would there be a difference between, let's say, the Islamic center as an individual entity and then the overall general Islamic community? So what would be some markers of the general community itself?
So as I said before, when we refer to a community, usually when I say, well, South Jersey community, well, what does it come to our mind? That, they belong to a certain center, certain institution. And that was a good thing that was laid in the foundation, that we had this place of gathering. And that place of gathering was important, not only that it gave us this identity that I belong to that center, for example, but associating ourselves to it, this is the place we frequently visit. So yes, when I refer to it as a community, I'm referring to Islamic community centers.
So can there be an Islamic community without having an attachment to an Islamic center?
It is not out of the realm of possibility, but I would see it to be difficult because, you have hospitals, you have patients, and then you have the doctors who cure and treat these patients. You have a community of, a lot of people who are professionals in their own field, but if there isn't someone who is well versed in the Islamic education and providing that, core beliefs and, the education that is needed, then obviously this community will be, there's Mr. Google and Wikipedia, you can get a lot of answers from there, but you need to have a center, a community center, or a community at least with a leader who's able to provide or cater for the needs, day-to-day needs of the community, in my humble opinion.
Jazakumullah. Thank you very much, Sayyidina. Let's show our gratitude to Sayyid for a wonderful presentation with Salat Salawat, please. And I would like to move on to our next presentation since we're talking so much about Islamic centers. Our next discussion will be specifically about the role of the Islamic centers in the future of Islam in America, given by our elder brother, Sayyid Baqir Imrani. Let us welcome him with Salat Salawat, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء أما بعد. First and foremost, I'd like to extend the congratulations for all of the brothers and sisters who have worked hard to bring about such a beautiful and important and inshallah helpful gathering and conference between the ulama and the community, or I should say communities, to address these important topics. And also may Allah reward all of you who participated and have come to be a part of this. These questions are very vital, and as the respected Sayyid mentioned, that the part which has been assigned to me is pertaining to the religious center. Before going into some detail about the role of a religious center, especially in the success and progress of the Shias in the United States, in particular, as well as to all the Muslims throughout the world, a few points must be stated as a prerequisite and a muqaddimah. You see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed for us certain important matters that assist us in increasing our iman and improving our religious state. One of those matters is time. The second matter is place. The third matter is persons. And the fourth that we could say is the ayat and sha'air of Allah, His signs. Individually, each one of these plays a vital role in our education, our progress, and our success in this world and the hereafter. But collectively, they also play a very important role. They benefit us in and of themselves, and they benefit us together as a sum and a collection. For instance, when we talk about time, and these things are very essential to the human being, time is very important to us. Therefore, Allah has not overlooked this. For instance, in the Quran, He says, He talks about ayyamullah, those who give importance. وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِكُلِّ صَبَّارٍ شَكُورٍ. To remember the days of Allah, or the times. Muharram, which is around the corner, is very important. We just passed Eid al-Hadir, which is very important. The holy month of Ramadan, the birth anniversaries, the commemoration of the martyrdom and the deaths of the Holy Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt. Allah uses all of these occasions and times as a means for assisting us and guiding us. Places are important, and in today's world, especially in the West, no place is more important than our Islamic centers. They are the closest to us. They are the most accessible to us. They are the ones that are able to meet our needs. Of course, the Quran talks about important places throughout. The sacred mosque, the holy Kaaba, إِنَّ أَوَّلَ بَيْتٍ وُضِعَ لِلنَّاسِ لَلَّذِي بِبَكَّةَ مُبَارَكًا وَهُدًى لِلْعَالَمِينَ. When it talks about Musa alayhi salam, فَلَمَّا أَتَاهَا نُودِيَ يَا مُوسَى إِنِّي أَنَا رَبُّكَ فَاخْلَعْ نَعْلَيْكَ إِنَّكَ بِوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوًى. So Allah has made certain times and certain places as muqaddas and holy, as mubarak and beneficial. The definition of muqaddas and mubarak is that it should be beneficial, it should be a source of assistance to humanity, especially the believers. And then of course, we have persons such as the Anbiya and the Awliya, none of who are more important than the Holy Prophet of Islam and his Ahlul Bayt. Allah has appointed these individuals as a means for our guidance. Allah has appointed these centers as a means for our guidance and has appointed these special occasions. Of course, all time belongs to Allah. All places belong to Allah. All of the servants are the servants of Allah and belong to Him. But because of the important role that certain places, certain times, and certain individuals play in the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah attributes them to Himself. For instance, the month of Ramadan is a month of guidance. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. Therefore, Allah calls this Shahrullah. All 12 months belong to Allah, but Ramadan, He has given it a special title, attributing it to Himself. All centers, masjids, Husayniyas, they belong to Allah. But the Kaaba is known as Baytullah al-Haram. All of us are the servants of Allah. But the Quran mentions the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as Abdullah, the servant of Allah. One of the reasons, or perhaps the most important reason, is the roles that they play for our guidance and our Islamic education and our religious progress. Let me insert a statement here before continuing the main topic, on the condition that you recite aloud salawat. That was good salawat, alhamdulillah. Religion, when we hear this word, we automatically think prayer, fasting, opening up the Holy Quran and reading. So when we think of religious success and progress, we think of how often do we come to the religious centers and so forth. No, this is one small aspect of it. The word religion or deen in the Quran and in the Arabic language or Islamic terminology, it turns our attention to all the aspects of our lives. So when we say religious progress, religious education, it's not just the acts of worship. Islam deals with every aspect of our lives. Marriage, children, parents, education, work, profession, home life, social life, economic, political, every aspect of our life, Islam has some guidance and is a user's manual for all these aspects. So I want to clear that up when we say religious education. It just doesn't mean how many verses of the Quran you memorized, or if you have learned how to read the Quran, or you've learned the ahkam of your prayer and so forth. Those are important, but every aspect of our lives. So, what is the role of the religious center? Before we go into the role of the religious center, we have to mention some important points about the religious center as what Allah has taught us in the Quran. In Surah At-Tawbah, the 9th surah and chapter of the Quran, Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ This word innama is used for exclusivity in the Arabic language, meaning this and only this. إنما يأمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله. Allah mentions 5 characteristics for establishing religious centers. If we pay attention to these 5 traits, 5 guidelines that Allah has outlined in the Quran for us in establishing, in building, in carrying our religious centers, in carrying out our religious programs, inshallah, then we will be successful. The number one thing, man amana billah, there has to be iman in Allah. It is one thing to say we believe or we have submitted and we are Muslims, but to have iman enter our hearts, that is very important. Therefore, those who have iman in Allah, if they participate, and the higher the iman, the more effective. In our religious centers, in whatever capacity, this is a formula for success. What does that mean, the success here? Success in relation to our religious centers is that they will meet their objectives. وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, there's iman on the day of judgment. One is that we pay attention that whatever we do, whatever program we hold, whatever improvements that we make, wherever that we build, we keep in mind Allah. He is visible. We are visible to Him. He is present. He sees our actions. More importantly, He knows our intentions. وَيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, on the day of judgment, we will have to answer, perhaps, the questioning and the reckoning about our involvement in the religious centers, in those houses which are known as the houses of Allah, will be more thorough on the day of judgment than what happens in our own homes. وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ, to establish, those who establish the prayer. وَآتَ الزَّكَاةِ, those who give from their financial responsibilities, whether that is the wajibat, khums, zakat, fitr, and so forth, fidya, or the mustahabat like sadaqah and so forth. وَلَمْ يَخْشَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, they have no fear other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see it happens many times in our religious centers and in religious programming, that we fear the people and their reaction. They're going to call and complain. Or they might not show up to the program. Or something along these lines, more than we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if Allah is our objective, then the religious center truly becomes a place where we can call it Baytullah. And the services are for Allah. Then we see that the goals are met very easily, very easily. We see that it's benefit, not just for our communities, but the community as a large, the Muslims, the non-Muslims, the people in the neighborhood that it belongs to, they will also benefit from it as well. You see this Kaaba? It's in a valley, dry, no agriculture. Yet, because of the presence of the Kaaba, everyone who lives near it and who is surrounded by it benefits from it. You can find 5-star cuisine near the Kaaba. You can find fruits and vegetables. They don't grow there, but from all over the world there. You find people from all over the world there. There's commerce, there's business. I would like to say there's politics, but presently not too much. But every aspect of humanity's life benefits because of the blessed house of the Kaaba. If our religious centers in the United States in particular can be termed Baytullah as well, everyone would benefit. Everyone. So these 5 qualities and guidelines are very important to keep in mind. And a lot of times we keep them in mind in the beginning. But we tend to forget. These are things that need to be reminded to us, or we should remind ourselves and have remembrance on a regular basis. On a regular basis. Inshallah, then our religious centers, alhamdulillah, are successful to a certain degree, but are also failures to a certain degree. You have to say both sides, as the respected Sayyid said. You have to be Bashir and Nadir. It cannot be just one side. But if we make it our objective that we want to serve these centers qurbatan ilallah, the failures will end and they will turn into successes as well. It might seem very basic, but these are not my words. I quoted to you from the Quran. These are the words of Allah. When the Quran talks about masjid and religious centers, and it doesn't do so in many verses. One of the verses is this matter. The other verse talks about taqwa. A religious center should be established on piety. And it shouldn't be masjid dhirar. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مَسْجِدًا ضِرَارًا وَكُفْرًا وَتَفْرِيقًا بَيْنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِرْصَادًا لِمَنْ هَارَبَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَيَحْلِفُونَ, they swear, إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا الْحُسْنَى. They make the religious centers as a means to bring disunity amongst the believers, as a means to spread kufr and disbelief and secularism, and to lead people astray. But they swear night and day that we just want goodness. We're trying to do goodness. Wallahu shahid, wallahu yashhadu annahum lakadhibun. Allah is a witness that they are the liars. One time there is a person that establishes a religious center, and by establishment I don't mean builds. Establishment means that the programs, that's a more important type of establishment. Even if the masjid is, in terms of its aesthetics, falling apart, but its guidance is very lofty. That is way more important than the masjid that is beautiful and gold and ruby and tons of marble and bringing in the experts to come and build it, and swimming pool and Turkish bathhouse and all of these types of amenities, superficial amenities, but it's empty from guidance. That is not important. Yes, it's good and it's nice to have those things, but more important is the spiritual establishment. Is that if our intentions are to pull away people from guidance and bring disunity and bring kufr, a lot of times some people, they do that intentionally. Like that first masjid Dhirar in Medina during the time of the Prophet, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to use the masjid to misguide people. A lot of times we don't know what we're doing. We're establishing Masjid al-Dhirar, but we're imagining that we are establishing Masjid Allah. And this is where shaitan and the nafs al-amara play a big role. That they fool us. They fool us. This nafs al-amara, I want to say very briefly the discussion is very important, but I want to cut it off here. But as a quick conclusion, the Quran mentions 4 types of nafs. Nafsul amara, nafsul musawwala, nafsul mutma'inna, nafsul lawama, nafsul mutma'inna. This nafsul lawama, this nafsul amara and musawwala are very dangerous. Nafsul amara enjoins and encourages us to do evil, true. But the method that it uses, no one wants to be evil. Everyone wants to be good. Even those people who commit atrocities, they believe that they're doing good for the world. They may bomb a country, and they say, well, we're bringing freedoms to these people. They're thinking that they're doing good. And many of them believe that. Is the part which is nafsul musawwala. Nafsul musawwala is that part of our souls that makes our evil deeds look good in our eyes. And this is a problem in every aspect of our lives, in particular when we run our religious centers as well. We might not be properly educated to run them. We might not be properly qualified to run them. And our nafs, it makes us imagine that we are, and we're the answer to all of the solutions. If we can remember those 5 principles and these 4 stages of the nafs and work on these matters in our personal dealings and especially our religious centers, many of the issues will be resolved, inshallah. Some of those issues I don't want to speak about now, but we will give an opportunity to the brothers and sisters to ask their questions, and hopefully the respected ulama, and I will try to address them as best as possible. There are very important issues that must be dealt with. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We have a question from one of the sisters.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I know you just said that you don't want to talk about the issues, that you don't want to go into too much depth. However, I'm curious as if you could just highlight a few of the shortcomings and how, if you can give some action items and how we can improve upon those. And also just maybe some words of like inspiration or encouragement on how we can guide the youth back into the masjids and the Islamic centers. Right now, as far as my experience, I've seen a lot of youth who are not really involved with their Islamic centers currently, and are moving towards speaking about universities age students who are more involved in like their secular education and building their life economically, financially. So I would just like to hear more about how we can get the youth back into the masjid, or like where is the problem stemming from? Is it the student or the adolescent, or is it the Islamic center?
Very important questions and comments. Requires a whole new conference to answer all of them. But just briefly, some of the issues. Now, I don't want to sound too negative as well as our dear friend, the respected doctor. He kindly reminded us as well. A lot of good is happening too in the religious centers. I don't want to overlook those, and they should be highlighted. There's a lot of good people who are sacrificing day in and day night and day out, and they're sacrificing their careers, their home lives and everything to do service in the masjid, and may Allah reward them. My highlighting it is not important, as long as it's highlighted before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's really important. But as your humble brother, I'd like to as well mention that and congratulate you on your successes as well. Issues are of particular importance. One of the things that we see throughout our communities in the West, especially in the United States, is that our religious centers are being run by, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of them are run by non-religious professionals. What do I mean by that? People who are not alim, people who are not scholars. So that plays a huge role into it. It is as if hospitals and clinics are run by non-doctors. I don't know if that happens today, but it does definitely. And we see a huge issue in the medical system here. And one of the reasons for it is that because other professionals and business-minded individuals come and run centers which are meant for healing. So the same thing happens for centers which are meant for spiritual healing as well. If we don't have righteous, knowledgeable scholars who are running most of the affairs, it doesn't mean that it's a dictatorship. It can work in harmony. But this is one issue. The other issue is that there is a lot of selfishness going around. And we see, unfortunately, so many religious communities and centers all throughout the United States are breaking up. There's one center, everyone is together. Then some individuals, they have their own ideas and their own objectives. They come, they cause issues, they break up, and they open a center, even in some circumstances, right across the street. So this is a huge issue. Are we doing this for ourselves, or are we doing it for Islam? If we're doing it for Islam, we put away our personal feelings and ideas and so forth, and we put Islam in the forefront. Another major issue that we see in religious centers is who they bring in for the guidance of the youth. And a lot of times they do it because we have to compete with a lot of other organizations and a lot of other places to attract the youth. And a lot of times it's done for that reason, to attract them. You know, there's a lot of speakers that are brought in that are not qualified one bit. I don't want to go into names. Does Imam Ali Masjid do that? I don't want to say anything, but yes, they do. At any rate, that are not qualified. Maybe they have a name, or maybe they have the gift of gab. They speak really fast and so forth. But what do? The majority of the time, they mislead our youth. They give them false information. That's very dangerous. The purpose of the service that we do is to give the proper information. And this happens all over the board. I don't want to highlight Imam Ali Masjid here. Imam Ali Masjid is like my own child. I've been here since the beginning, and a lot of these nails and screws and so forth have my name on it, so to say. Even one of our dear brothers has a nail that went through his finger to prove that. Let us recite aloud salawat for him. In the construction of this masjid, we were putting up the walls, and with the nail gun, someone shot the nail gun and went through the wood, and it went through his finger.
Are we going to name who shot the nail gun?
If we named that, who was the victim? So these are some important points that we need to take effect. For instance, I know of individuals, I'm not going to name names, and they went to Qom or Najaf, for instance, not even a year. Learn how to wrap this up. Come back, they're lecturing all over the world. Not even 1 year. Not even enough to learn the language. Or some just to learn enough of the language. Is that proper for us to give them a platform, especially to address the youth and so forth? So we kind of look at running our centers in order to attract the youth especially as a place of entertainment. Because to be honest, that's who we're competing with. The entertainment industry. They have all of the attention of our children and our youth, and we're trying to turn our religious centers of a center, not of education, of learning of spirituality, but a place of entertainment to bring these type of individuals so that we can attract them. What is the final result? That is the question. Inshallah, I went on too long and to give an opportunity to the rest of the ulama or other questions to be addressed on this topic or others.
Sayyid, Jazakumullah, thank you very much. Let us show our gratitude with Salat Salawat, please.
I must have said something to say at night.
So now we would like to ask and welcome Ayatollah Sakhat Hussein to deliver his presentation on the role of the clergy. This was a very good segue of question and answer, the segue into the next discussion, which is the role of the clergy in the future of Islam in America. Let's welcome him with the loud salawat, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. My very respected brothers and sisters in Iman, particularly ulama, it's my great honor to speak about this important topic which is mostly needed for our community. Role of clergy. First and foremost, let me quote a quotation of Imam Ali, which will help for my talk. Imam said, if I find someone whose intellectual is not honest, and if I find an honest is not intellectual. This is the problem which we are facing in America today. A lot of so-called scholars or speakers or orators who are capturing the pulpit, they are not qualified enough. That is why they do not even know how to guide themselves rather than how they will be capable to guide our youth and our community. As Quran says, role of the clergy is وَلِيُنْذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ. They should create a fear of Allah among the community. This is the goal of clergies. Due to the lack of clergy, let me give you two examples. In 1995, when I was a resident servant of religious services at Baitul Qaim, one of my students went to South America, student of Qom. When he went there, he sent me a video. On the day of Ashura, they have a procession in South America, and they say, Jose, Jose. And I have that video now in my home. I watched that video and I called him back and I said, who these people are? He said, these were Shias. Due to lack of preacher, lack of clergy, they got converted to Christianity. But still, they maintain one of the habits they used to commemorate day of Ashura, and they are commemorating that day today as well. So this is one of the dangers of lack of clergy. The second one, I went to Harrisburg 20 years back to perform a marriage ceremony in one of the biggest churches of US, one of the 20 biggest churches of USA. They showed me upstairs. I performed the marriage downstairs. They showed me upstairs where more than 1,000 chairs were there, and it was written that this was basically mosque built by Albanian Muslims. Due to the lack of preacher, they got converted to Christianity, and they devoted this mosque to a church. These two examples will be enough for my audience. If you have vacuum of clergies and preachers, this might happen in future. That is why just building the centers are not enough. To establish and maintain those centers is more important than building. May Allah guide us to establish and manage those centers for the guidance of our community. MashaAllah, the religious centers, Alhamdulillah, they are doing good job, and the clergy as well. And the elderly people, they are doing very good job. But the problem is, the problem of misguidance and ratio of misguidance is that high that all of us could not manage it. There is no blame on centers, no blame on clergies, no blame on administration. The problems are very dangerous in United States of America. A lot of youngsters, they are getting now, not only they are getting irreligious, but they are converting to atheist. I met a lot of people, a lot of youngsters who are not anymore Muslims. They became atheists. So the problems are too much. That is why our duty is to work more hard to protect our generation. Let me give you a few examples which we can set as role model. Example of Allama Hilli. All the Iran was not Shia when he visited King of Isfahan. And entire Iran converted and became Shia due to one of his dialogues with Sunni ulama. So one person converted entire Iran in 800 year of Hijrah. The other example, one of my brothers and my friends, Zakzaki, he has converted 15 million people. 15 million people were converted by him, and they accepted Shia Islam in Nigeria. He went from Qom there and he converted that much. These two examples will help us. The clergies should take care of two issues, internal and external. If somebody attacks on theology from outside, they are supposed to protect that theology. Internally, if the families are being broken, it's the duty of clergy to unite them. So clergy has more tough job than Iran and Iraq, than Syria and Lebanon, than Nigeria and Bahrain. They have toughest job in United States of America. Role of the clergy is to protect theology, to protect aspects of jurisprudence, to create love and harmony among the community, and to avoid division, and to defend any kind of attacks internally and externally. Let me sum up my humble talk with two more issues, and that will end my talk. One is the coordination and cooperation among the community and clergies is more important than everything. If a person makes a boat and he doesn't give to proper captain to run that boat into the water, will never be successful. So both should coordinate and cooperate to get the salvation. The goal of clergies and goal of administration, goal of the executives of the mosque and centers is the salvation and is to solve the problems and is to get into Jannah and follow the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt. But if we can cooperate more and coordinate more and help each other, our journey will be easy and we will easily walk into Jannah. And if we will spend our entire time to fight against each other, as mashallah ulama said, that will not help us to achieve the goal. Our goal is piety, and we cannot achieve the piety without suppressing our egos. If we can suppress our egos, that will help us. Inshallah, when you will ask question, I will elaborate a little more. Let me end my humble talk with the last issue, and that is, when I went to Qum, I saw there, Hawza did not have any building. And I was shocked. I asked from my teachers, where is Hawza? They said all the mosques, all the Hussainiyas, all the Islamic centers of Qum, they are Hawza. So I will urge all the administration of executives of our centers that you provide the chance for the Hawza classes at your centers and mosques. That will help, and inshallah each and everybody will be qualified, and that will help. That pulpit will never be used by unqualified people, and podium will never be used by those people who misguide our community and who play the games with our youth. May Allah give me and you capability to find the way how to follow the footsteps of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad.
Any questions from the audience before I ask my own questions? Okay. Yes, Doctor, please, can someone please bring the microphone?
Thank you so much. It was much better. Several years ago, we heard from Sheikh Kashmiri, or Sayyid Kashmiri, that there is an international school has been opened in Najaf for having some kids which has been raised in their native language, like English or so, be taken there and become a scholar and be sent, all over, including the U.S. And probably those are the ones that they can help the future. Can you give us any insight about what's going on? Now there is a shortage of the ulama to cover all the centers to speak fluently in English and be a good leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Alhamdulillah, I have Hawza here, and we teach in 4 languages, in Arabic, Persian, Urdu, and English. Alhamdulillah. And we are verified and certified by Najaf Seminary and Qum Seminary. All the grand ayatullahs, they authorize us to teach up to Kharij, Alhamdulillah. So we need your support. You support this Al-Mahdi Seminary, which is based in New Jersey. And Alhamdulillah, I have qualified more than 110 students so far who are studying in Najaf and Qum, or who are leading the congregations here. Even the 72 jails of New York State, one of my students is chaplain over there. And in the all prisons of Florida, one of my students is chaplain over there. Alhamdulillah, we have here, of course, they have opened the Hawza in Najaf, they have Hawza in Qum, who teach in English. But Alhamdulillah, we have Hawza here. We need the support from all the masajid and centers that we can work more. Even we can arrange the classes in your centers, Alhamdulillah, once a week, twice a week. Thank you very much.
Since we're talking about the clergy, sometimes there's a misunderstanding among some people about what their individual responsibility as a Muslim is towards the clergy. For example, when it comes to the A'lam Mujtahid, everyone everyone knows that we are supposed to perform taqleed of the A'lam Mujtahid. Is there some kind of similar responsibility that we have as the average Muslim towards the clergy who are not our marji taqleed, who are not mujtahideen, like the resident scholars and speakers at the centers? Do we have some type of Islamic responsibility towards them as well?
First and foremost, while picking and appointing a clergy, we are supposed to look forward toward the seminary system. Either you contact with Grand Ayatollah, or you contact the rep of Grand Ayatollah at least. Contact to Hawza of Qom, Hawza of Najaf, or the seminaries who are being run in your country. Without concerning and without asking Grand Ayatollahs and great ulama, appointing someone is not good experience. Just for our context, if we appoint someone as resident alim and tomorrow we will know that he was not qualified, this will be harmful. You are unable to remove him, and if you remove him, you will create animosity amongst your own community.
Yes, in the back, please.
Assalamu alaikum. This question is for any of the panelists. So, is it the responsibility of centers to expose their congregation to more advanced topics in Islamic knowledge, even if congregation members may not be ready or understand every aspect of what's being discussed?
Do you have any examples, just for language service, so we can all understand?
So, for example, if there are some community members, or if the resident speaker wants to introduce a more advanced topic, something that hasn't previously been discussed at the center before, but they're unsure if the average community member has the strong enough foundation to understand every part of what is being discussed of that specific branch of Islamic knowledge.
Sounds very good question. I think I can speak for all of the scholars sitting over here. As it is, it's very difficult when we ascend a member. We are presented with a task to deliver a message to a wide variety and the range of ages. From you find a 6-year-old, 7-year-old in the crowd to a 70 and 75-year-old in the crowd, and everyone in between. And so how do you deliver a message where everyone is benefiting from it? Either you go down to the level of those who are young, then the elders will phase out of it, or you go up to the level of the elders of what they expect, then the youngsters will be phasing out of it. So there's a famous riwayat, I believe it's from the Holy Prophet, كَلِّمُ النَّاسِ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Speak to the people according to their level of intellect. If we were to introduce a discussion specifically regarding the Islamic jurisprudence or the principles of Islamic jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh, for example, the concept of the implied or the apparent knowledge, for example, or the apparent meaning. If you were to introduce that, obviously it requires some sort of basis and background before this sort of discussion can be done. But yes, there should be, as Maulana was also referring to and alluding to, Hawza-geared classes in every center where you can discuss these important topics, which may not be a cup of tea for everyone. Therefore, it should be, a center should be able to cater for all and not just for a specific group of people. While you hear new topics from the member, very fancy topic which attracts your attention, which is good, but then, sometimes it is a disappointment that what you were expecting was not delivered, for example. I think it's important that we're able to address various issues from various different aspects, from how, from where different people are coming from. So therefore, it is important to use these, but I also want to add, if this question has, answer has satisfied you, that a lot of time, the hostility that exists within our own circles. I alluded towards the end of my talk regarding inviting others from other faith, from even Ahl Sunnah. It is very difficult to not offend people from within the Shia madhab sitting in the crowd while I'm speaking, let alone those who belong to other madhab. It's very easy that I can, offend them of what I say. Even if I may be quoting a historical event in the history, it could really offend someone. So I think this hostility should not exist, and we should be able to, and our Maraji have given us the instruction regarding that. We should be able to go beyond, because there's so many things that are still, have not been addressed from moral and ethical values. And then there lies the need to discuss disputed, polemics. I mean, sometimes you have to discuss those, but why go into the controversial and the disputed things? Sorry, I alluded to other and direction.
I have a follow-up to that because I think, was there another meaning also implied to that question, or that was it? So I may have understood it as, not understood it differently, but there could be a different way it could be taken. One is the intellectual preparedness of the audience, and the other could be the social and cultural preparedness of the audience, where there may be certain topics that the audience is intellectually prepared for, but because of cultural background or the way that they were raised or the opinions that they have about certain Islamic matters, as you alluded to, they may take some type of offense to the topic that's discussed. So is it possible, what happens if a topic seems necessary to discuss, but the audience might be offended by it? What should be done with that? Is it the clergy's responsibility to discuss these issues? And what should the audience do in response to that?
Basically, it should not go beyond the religious aspects. If the most sophisticated topics are not damaging religious needs, that is okay. But we cannot go beyond the religion, otherwise the atheist people, they will take advantage of that.
If I can add a little bit to that question, which was good, but prior to that, to the question that the respected doctor brought up about the Hawza, which was established for Western students in Najaf. I was there at that time, and unfortunately, all of those projects failed. And to this date, there is not one student left from that time for those projects. There were some successes. One is sitting next to me, alhamdulillah. But that leads us to a greater issue, that we imagine that if it's not Najaf or Qom, then it is not sufficient. And I think in today's world, one of the responsibilities of the religious centers and the community as well is that we should facilitate, as the respected Dr. Nusayed mentioned, we should facilitate Hawza style classes and even full-time Hawza in the United States. And there are efforts being done, as the respected doctor said. There's also Hawza in Chicago as well. There was one in Los Angeles, but unfortunately that came to an end.
I apologize for interrupting. There may be some audience members who might not know what the word Hawza means.
Okay, so basically Hawza is a seminary, religious institution where you learn to become an Islamic scholar, where students of Islam go there. So I think we don't give enough importance to these types of institutions here. If we work towards, for instance, supporting these institutions and namely financially, providing scholarships, moral support is good too, and help facilitate in all aspects to establish these institutions in the United States and also encourage the youth from our communities. I'm sure in every community there's at least one or a few individuals who's interested to go to Qom or Najaf or study in the Hausa, but they're unable to because of other responsibilities. But if those exist in the United States and they're up to par or good enough, that it would be easier for them to attend those. So this is not just a responsibility for the ulama, the parents and the families. It's a complete responsibility of the entire community, the Shia community in the United States, regardless of where and who you affiliate with. It's all of our responsibilities. If we work to establish these, then we all will benefit from that. And coming back to the question and comment that you made, it's a very important. A good speaker and a scholar has to be a magician. They have to be able to juggle many different things at the same time. And, you know, we have to, in terms of knowledge and information, we have to remove ignorance and unawareness at the first step. Then that knowledge that we all already have, what we already know, it has to be reinforced and maintained so it's not lost. And then comes the matter of increasing the knowledge. So this is a challenge and also a responsibility that as Muslims, not just people like us in this panel, every single one of us is responsible to increase our knowledge. Unfortunately, as a Shia community in the United States, in this age of science and technology and the progress of information, and how you can obtain that information so easily. Years ago, if you wanted a ruling from your marja in Qom or Najaf or something, they would send a letter. It would take months for that letter to reach Najaf. The marja would answer it, mail it back. It would take months for it to come back to you. Now, you know, at a click of a finger or with the phone, very quickly we can attain this information. So the means are there and they're better than before, but increasing our knowledge is very important. Not just for Hausa students, but for all of us. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that we have very low levels of knowledge when it comes to our faith, especially our madhab. When it comes to our principles and why we believe in Allah, why we believe in the imams, can we prove all of these things? So these things must be addressed from the pulpits, from the classrooms, and from our centers. And if I can say very briefly, the centers can only do so much. You know, they can only do so much. And their hands are tied behind their backs most of the time anyway. But it all comes back to us as well, individually and our families and the community at large, that we have to be active participants to increase two things in our lives. Our knowledge of our madhab and Islam, and also our spirituality and our connection to our madhab and the leaders of our madhab and Islam.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, one of the questions that the sister had asked was how we can bring the youth towards, who tend to be going away more towards secular education, how can we bring them back into the fold of Islam, what can we do to do that? There is no simple answer for that. There's no magic wand that we can wave and then they'll just simply become religious. It's an entire process. It takes a village to raise a child. I have seen it myself over the past 42 years that I've been in this country, that if you simply, if the parents assume that if they take the child to a Sunday school or Saturday school for 1 hour or 2 hours, they drop them there, then they go away shopping, or they go away so that they're relieved. It's a babysitting job. And then they expect that the child learn mazhab with that, become an observant to Shia. So it doesn't work like that. the atmosphere in the house, the friends that the children socialize with, the family atmosphere, all these play a big role in the formation of an Shia observant child. Nowadays, alhamdulillah, we have, I don't know how many of you are aware, that the George Washington University is starting this fall an undergraduate program with Shia theology as one of the majors. So the information is available, the facilities are available. It's up to us how much we are willing to sacrifice and extend our reach to obtain this information and make what you call use of these facilities so they can benefit us. That's all.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, all the scholars. I'm grateful for all of you. You all had great points, and I thank Sandy that you were inviting us over here. Excuse me. One more point that I wanted to mention that it was in my, it's been in my mind forever, that we talk about unity and scarcity of ulama, but we're not even having unity among Shias. Especially you talked about Eid al-Qadir. It's one of the important Eid we can have. Why can't we have Eid al-Qadir together, all the centers in this area? We have to start some point. If we don't have enough good ulama, we should, I know it's difficult to get all the different communities together, but as everybody knows, I don't remember the exact details, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Holy Quran has few times mentioned I created you all from different tribes so you can come and get together to know each other. I don't think even our Shia community, we know each other that well. Everybody has their own culture and have mixed up with the Iman, and we don't know what's going on. So I think the start is for all the ulamas try to have at least, I know it's difficult because we haven't had it, at least once a year for Eid al-Qadir or something, to start having all the centers to have a bigger place and have maybe the best ulama and have the occasion so maybe even our youth can get to know each other and we can learn from one another. And inshallah, in the long run, maybe we should have less centers, but more qualified scholars that can teach all of us at the same time. Jazakallah.
Any thoughts on that? It was a very in-depth comment.
Just very quickly, and you're not the only one with these concerns. We see this concern throughout the board, all throughout the United States. Many people mention this, but I'd like to remind us of a couple points. One point is that unity does not mean complete conformity. So unity is very good, but we can be united, but also have differences as well. It doesn't mean that we all should wear the same paint color, or at least color match. So unity doesn't mean complete conformity. The second point is that, for instance, you mentioned Eid al-Qadir, or this is a problem with Eid al-Fitr a lot of times, or the start of Ramadan and so forth. The issue of the moon sighting, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it, is that Eid does not have to be the same day in every part of the world. Yes, we have some issues where maybe in the same town it's on different days and so forth, but and these are deeper issues that unfortunately we don't have the time to discuss. Maybe later on we can discuss it. The third point is that there's two types of ikhtilaf, or disagreement. And one is a bad type, and we all know what kind of ikhtilaf is bad. But there's also a good type of ikhtilaf. For instance, in scholarship, for instance, a lot of people ask the question, why don't all of the mujtahideen give the same fatwa about everything? There's ikhtilaf in their views and their approaches and in their rulings. Of course, the majority and the most fundamental issues, it's all the same. But there are differences. And this is a blessing. We think of it as a curse, but in reality it's a blessing. If there was no type of ikhtilaf in scholarship, for example, then the scholarship of the school of Ahlul Bayt, it would be stagnant, it wouldn't progress. But we see because of this room for disagreement that Allah Himself has given to us, that our Imams have given to us, that we see that Shia scholarship is amazing. It's amazing. It has progressed so much, and up until the Day of Judgment, it will progress and it will never cease to stop. But when we look at those institutions, when they want to make everything uniform and conform, you see that they're stagnant and they stop. So, inshallah, keeping in mind that those couple of points, some of these issues will be resolved.
If I can just address the aspect that the sister was asking, the unity and the scarcity of ulama, so why not have a joint program, for example, so that we can bring, which is good. I think Sunnis have done more in this area than we Shias have, primarily because they're larger in numbers. In North Jersey, for example, I have been part of some of the programs with various masajid of Ahl Sunnah that they did a collective Jummah prayer, for example, where they did it in a place in a park. 3,000-4,000 people showed up. There was a speaker who gave the sermon, and that happened. I think we can do that, and we should encourage, especially on bigger events. There's nothing wrong with that. Not necessarily that it shows unity. It definitely solidifies and shows solidarity between ourselves. But obviously, that will require a bigger place. That will require maybe some people to travel a certain distance. People will say, well, if we go ahead and get a bigger place, then we'll be paying extra for that. Instead, we can just do it in our own centers. And there could be various issues, language preference, for example. Some people, they'd rather have it in their own language than a language which unites us all in this part of the country. So all of these hosting, someone says, well, I want to be the host, and the egos sometimes may even get in the way. So, which is a very good suggestion, and I think this is something which should be done at least for Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Fitr, and not so much Eid al-Qadir or other, because there isn't any salat involved. Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Fitr, you can have something like this collective, and it should be encouraged.
So, I have another question going back to the issue of family and community, and sometimes we have, when we're talking about unity, we have intergenerational disunity. So, there was two parts to this question, and I'll ask one once that's answered, then I'll ask the second part. The first would be that, of course, we know that there's a problem that many youth don't listen to adults because the youth think that they already know everything. And this is a very common problem. So what can the family, the Islamic centers, community, what can we do about it? What's the root of the problem, and how can we address it?
After the graduation from Sunday school and Saturday school, usually the centers, they do not have any interactive activity among the youth. That is why they run away and they believe and they assume that they are more than qualified. So I believe each and every center should have any kind of weekly or bi-weekly or monthly services for the youth. I have noticed if you take them to Hajj, Umrah or Ziyarat, after returning, they are entirely changed. So we can use this tool as well to put them on the track. Also, if we can have, in Arabic we say al-muhazara, dialogues. If we can have once a month dialogue of our youth with elders and ulama, with their resident alim, this will help also. If we can make a network among the youth, whether they are in college or university, as Dr. Sadiq said, may Allah give him a long life. It's a very good addition that university is opening Shia theology, but we can open Shia theology's referrals at our centers on weekly basis or monthly basis. There's a good step, but we can take some step for our youth. Inshallah, with these few steps, we can gather them and we can pull them back towards Shia theology and toward the practice.
Would anyone like to add anything before I go on to the next part?
Just, if we keep in mind, and the question is very important, that most parents experience that, is that the youth reach a certain age where they know everything and they don't listen to everything. But there's a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam where he says that the stages of a child's development are 3. The first stage, the child, whatever they do, it's very sweet to the parents. The little words that they say, they're calling, first steps and everything. This is the first 7 years. Then the next 7 years is that whatever the parents say, it's as if it's divine and cosmic law. The child, whatever their parents say, even if they learn something in school or something, they say, well, I have to go ask my mom, I have to go ask my dad. They're very receptive to the guidance and the teaching of their parents in the second. And he says that the third stage, the next 7 years, is as if they are the enemies of their parents. Their parents are like an enemy to them. They don't want to listen. They don't. So if we take advantage of the first 2 stages, especially the second stage, and if we cannot do it ourselves, but at least we facilitate the means so that they are properly trained in the Islamic education, then it will last them a lifetime. Even if they seem to go astray and so forth, they will come back. The second point I want to mention is that all of this discussion, it seems very gloom and very scary, and we're in bad times, and it's true, to a certain degree we are. And our challenges are very tough, and there are many. We're surrounded by it everywhere, the dangers. However, Islam too is not weak. Islam is very powerful. If we are able to plant the seed of Islam in their hearts, this seed will definitely grow. Of course, you have to water it and give it a little sunshine here and there, but the importance is that the seed and the message of Islam is more powerful than all of these issues and problems. The issue is that we need to work harder to give this message. So when they're learning from TV, online, schools, whatever, very dangerous, very powerful. But if we present it with the proper Islamic answers, they will not forget. And those are the answers that in this battle within them, pulling them from one side to the other, those are the matters that will come and assist them. And if eventually, inshallah, they will grow up to be fine, believing men and women.
So a follow-up to that would be kind of the reverse. So there are some adults who don't listen to youth because they think the youth don't know anything. And by this we mean, of course, when they're very young, of course, they don't know much. But let's say we're talking about young professionals who are still considered youth. So in some Islamic centers, the elders who manage the centers don't take any advice from these young professionals, from these youth, and they don't give them any responsibility, don't give them any jobs. They don't hand over any type of control to them, which kind of makes the youth feel disheartened and makes them feel like they're being pushed away. So what can we do to help solve this rift and misunderstanding?
I believe one of the experiences I got from Iran is, Iranian people, they say, Hamishe ba bachaha dost bashid. Always be friend with your children. I believe this we are lacking, and we are having vacuum of this. If we are friend with the children, with the youth, we can resolve their problem and they can solve our problem. And if we dictate them, they are not going to listen us and we are not going to listen them.
There was a bumper sticker that says, "Be nice to your children. They are going to choose your nursing home."
Inshallah, there won't be a nursing home. So there's another question that I would like to ask, and we have a lot of audience members here who are involved in masjid management, and that is that it's very easy to criticize the management of Islamic centers, especially since most of us were from the outside, and people take it for granted. We don't appreciate what people have built through great sacrifice. There's something that our teacher, Ayatollah Sajdi, may Allah give him health and long life, used to say that when somebody wants to start a new project, like an Islamic center, most people don't help, but then once it's built, everybody calls it our masjid or our center. So if you could, please explain what goes into starting or maintaining an Islamic center, or maybe if you could describe some of the sacrifice people make, because sometimes we do need to remind ourselves so we can appreciate it more.
There is hadith, Man bana masjidan, banallahu lahu baytan fil jannah. Who will make a mosque, Allah will make his home, build his home in the Jannah. And also according to Imam Ali, al-julusu fil masjidi khairum min al-julusi fil jannah. Sitting in the mosque is better than sitting in the Jannah. Somebody asked him, how come? He said, al-julusu fil jannati lin-nafs wal-julusu fil masjidi lillah. You will sit in Jannah for yourself, and you sit in the masjid for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone knows how much sawab he or she will get after building or managing the mosque, then there will be no complaints left. Of course, the people are going to criticize always, and you keep doing inshallah. May Allah reward you all.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'll keep on asking questions because I got plenty. So another question similar to that would be that it is also very easy to criticize the clergy or to trivialize what they do. We know that there are some people who are not Hawza trained, but they feel that they can go and they can give a speech and guide the community even better than the clergy do. So if you could give us some idea about, let's say, number one, what goes into becoming a qualified member of clergy. If you could give some insight into that, what goes into it.
I had very good experience when I went to Qum in early 80s, late 70s. I went to Masjid of Ayatullah Langurudi, Rahmatullahi alayh. He told me a story that one of the executive members of the masjid came to me and he told Ayatullah, I want to oppose you. It is animosity in my heart against you, and I want to become your opponent. Ayatollah said, I told him, do you have any qaza prayer in your account? He said, yes. How many years? He said, 10 years. Okay, perform all those qaza prayers, then come to me and we will fight. He came after a few years. Then I told him, is your father alive? No, he passed away. Does he have some qaza prayers, qaza fasting? Yes. Perform those and come to me. Meanwhile, his mother died. I said, it took at least 12 years and then he became my friend. This is the solution which I can give to the clergies, to not fight, give them homework. If you will not give them homework, they will fight against you.
Keep them busy.
Yeah, keep them busy.
Any insight into just help people understand what sacrifices a person makes? Or something, like, let's say, a little bit more tangible. So, could you explain somehow for us to understand what goes into, for example, preparing the average speech, the average lecture, the average qualified member of the clergy delivers? What goes into preparing something like that?
That was two important points. And the second point, the preparation that's required, for instance, by a speaker and a scholar. There was a famous orator and scholar in Iran during the time of the revolution, and Hujjatul Islam Falsafi. He was famous for his lecturing and so forth. And he had a very natural, God-given knack of how to put the subject together, and he was very skilled at bringing different sources and finding the proper riwayat and hadith in relation to the subject. They asked him, how long does it take you to prepare for each lecture? Mind you, this is when he's already an expert, well-renowned. He said, at least 8 hours I prepare for this lecture. One of the other ulama he mentioned to me years ago, himself a mujtahid, he said that I spoke to one of the PhDs, a doctor, and we were having a discussion. He said, when I get invited somewhere to speak, I don't go unless it's at least 2 months prior notice. Because he said, it takes me 2 months just to prepare for that lecture. So a lot of times we come and we hear the lecture, and mashallah, wahla, nare haydari, and it's really nice, but we don't see what's behind it. There's a lot of work, a lot of discipline, a lot of sacrifice that goes into that. That's the first part. The other part is that what the people who service the centers, you know, there's these terms of executive committee and management committee and all of these stuff. We've copied these terms from the business world and so forth. These are not, in my opinion, suitable for our religious centers. We're all servants. We serve that masjid. Inshallah, we serve it well. And many of the people, some of whom who are here and many have been doing it for decades, they sacrifice a lot, day and night. These centers become like their children. And many times they get more attention than their own children do. And we don't see the sweat and tears and the hardships that they go through. And we're very quick to criticize. This is insan for you. We're very quick to criticize. We overlook a million of our own shortcomings, but we highlight one shortcoming from someone else for a million years. So, as much as a task is important to the level of its importance, the more difficult it is, and the more perseverance and the more iman it requires. And I think that's why in that verse about running the masajid, one of the reasons, Allah mentions iman to him and the day of judgment in the beginning, and in the end He mentions fear of Allah. Don't fear anyone. Do your work. Take the criticism. But don't fear it. Continue, because as Maulana mentioned, the status and being a part of the masjid is very lofty. Sitting in the masjid is greater than sitting in Jannah. That's a huge, huge statement if we really think about it.
So there's another situation. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, so they gave examples of these great orators who would prepare. I know someone as well who said, you know, to us that you guys don't give enough time to prepare for a lecture, whereas I, for the first 10 days of Muharram, not me, this person is saying, well, was a great scholar, great orator in Pakistan. He said, I spent, you know, almost 9 months preparing for the Majalis of Muharram and Safar, which includes hours of studying, bringing out the traditions, ayat, even memorizing them, putting lectures together, rehearsing it, and then being able to present something which was mind-blowing as well as full of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge. But a person like me, if you were to ask me how long does it take me, with my limited experience, although I've been speaking for the past 15 years now in the United States, it still takes me about 2.5, 3 hours. If I get not 2 months notice, a few days notice, 2.5, 3 hours to prepare something which would be worth presenting. Now, obviously, people who've been speaking for 30, 40, 50 years, they're probably able to present something much better, more beneficial, and something which has the, as we said, mawad, matter in it, just out of their memory because they've been reciting for such a long time. But as a student like me, it takes at least 2.5, 3 hours to prepare a lecture on a specific topic.
There's another situation that sometimes comes up, and it involves the relationship between the community and the Islamic Center. And if any of you, all of you, could give some advice to both sides of this situation. And that is that some people come to the management of an Islamic center, and they want the Islamic Center, they want the management to do something. The management says, no, we can't do it for whatever reason. Sometimes good, sometimes might not be good. So the management says no, what the people want doesn't happen, so the people will do one of the following things. Either they say, we're never coming here again, we're going to go to a different center. Or, as you mentioned before, they'll go open a different center. Or they won't go to any center, and they say, we're going to just start holding religious events outside the Islamic Center. Like, again, I'll start doing it, Dua Kamil at my house, if they won't do what I want on Thursday night and so on. So what can be done on both sides of this equation so that we can mend these rifts that sometimes exist?
I believe if we can train our community in Islamic environment and make them pious people, then these fights will go away. Usually we do not focus on the piety and taqwa. We go behind the rituals. Rituals are not the goal of our community. Basically, the piety is the goal of the community. The executive, they should be very humble, and the community should not be aggressive as well. That is how we can manage all these problems.
I mean, if there are suggestions that are beneficial and there isn't any personal agenda, like a few years ago someone came to me and said, we want to hold the rituals of Charshambe Suri in your masjid. Can you give us the permission to go ahead and do that? Obviously, it's something which we want because it's not an Islamic event, and dumping over the fire and all that stuff that goes along with it. So denied it right away. But if something which is productive, which is for construction of the constructive reasons, for the benefit of the community, then yes, as long as there's piety in the management, those who are running, then I don't think there should be any issue for them to decline. It may result in one of those situations, as you said, either they'll stop coming, it's their loss if they don't come. They'll start another center, which is unlikely, that it will remain steadfast for too long, or they'll start holding programs, on their own, which again could be beneficial, but again, they're isolating themselves from, because the initial discussion, remember, I kept on emphasizing that while we have these categories of ethnicities, Afghan center, Iranian center, Arab centers, or if there's a community of South Jersey, Central Jersey, Northern Jersey, we associate ourselves from a certain community. And if we separate, then it is definitely going to be our own loss. Wallahu alam.
Just a few very quick points. One thing that's required in a religious center, which we call the houses of Allah, it needs to be welcoming, and openness is required. Another point that's required is open-mindedness. We can't think of just our own way and that's it, my way or the highway. So that's a... The third point is that how do we measure success in our religious centers? Is it just turnout? It seems like this is a big question all the time. Is we believe that we're successful if our turnouts are big. And perhaps we need to rethink that how we measure the success of our religious centers. And it shouldn't just be by how many people are showing up. We should have other benchmarks, inshallah, to measure the success.
There was a couple questions that were asked earlier, and we saved them for the final Q&A. One of them was, let me see if I word this properly, how long does it take for Islam, I think what they're trying to ask is, how long do you think it will take for Islam to be accepted, I guess, as mainstream in America? The wording is a little bit different in the question, but I'm trying to interpret it a little better. Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa So we ask the brothers and sisters, before we get to answering the question, if we could all with a loud salawat, please invite Mawla Qalbi Abbas Rizvi, who is visiting us from India. Please another loud salawat for his continued success, inshallah. So the question was, how long do you think it would take for Islam to become what will be considered mainstream? I guess they're thinking as one of the mainstream religions in the United States of America. And in relation to that, why is it that some people might be afraid of the religion of Islam?
Let me elaborate one more point. I do not know how many of you know this important issue, that there is a book in Washington Library, National Library, which says Islam before Columbus. It does mean before Columbus, those red Indians who were living in the United States, they were Muslims. So past of Islam in USA was very bright, and the present of Islam is okay, but I may say the future of Islam will be very bright, inshallah.
So to predict based on the numbers, I did run some of the numbers as I was speaking. 50 years ago, there were 50,000, now about 6 million. Now that does not really represent Islam, that's just the number of Muslims, which is constantly growing. And if it does grow at this pace, then we will have, a very large minority, which will be one of the mainstream religions. But the second portion of the question, it's very obvious. The negative propaganda, Islamophobia, the way Islam is painted, presented in the media, even in Hollywood. It just gives a very negative image. So you have the constant fear of, in the form of Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, same people, different face, different names. And that'll continue because that's one of the elements that they fear of the true nature of Islam, that it presents. If it's presented, then it will overcome. So that's the reason behind the negativity that is associated, which is very obvious. Media is something which plays a major role in that. But how long it will take before, nobody can guess that. But at the pace that Muslim population is growing, I don't think it'll be too long. Maybe within the next 50 years, or less.
There's an ayah in the Quran where Allah says, "Wallahu mutimmu nurihi walau karihal kafirun, walau karihal kafirin." So Allah, He's going to bring to perfection and completion the nur and the light of Islam, not just in America, and all over the world. As to the point why people fear it, well, one of the major reasons why Islam is being portrayed as a negative matter rather than the positive thing that it is that it is a threat to many special interests. It's a threat to a debt slave society. It's a threat to the bankers' rule. It's a threat to the rule of the 1%. It's a threat to all of these institutions and organizations and people who are in power and they benefit very handsomely financially in the world. So when something comes and they see that as one of the threats that will take away all of their advantages, obviously they're going to portray it as something vile, something bad. This is not something new. When the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started his mission in Arabia, you saw that he went from someone that they used to call Amin, Al-Amin, and As-Sadiq, to someone that they said he is Majnun. He is a Sahir, he's a sorcerer, don't listen to your words, even to the point where they used to put cotton in their ears so they don't listen to the words of the Prophet because they thought he's going to put them in a trance or cast a spell over them and so forth. So they started to attack the personality of the Holy Prophet, and the Quran quotes that, and history shows us that. But regardless of how much they did, we saw that in a very short time, Allah spread the nur of the Holy Prophet that all over Arabia, and it started to go into neighboring countries and so forth. And the same holds true to Islam. So yes, Islam is viewed as a threat by certain people who have great influence, they have a lot of power, and they're able to portray it as negative, vile, and evil. It's our job to present true Islam to the people. There's many examples of people who they see what goes on in the media and the so-called news outlets and so forth, and the negative message that they hear about Islam, and they themselves say, well, I have a neighbor that is Muslim, I have a coworker that is Muslim. No, I don't believe these things because I see the character of my neighbor or my coworker or my friend. So one of the best methods to show the true beauty of Islam today in the United States is through proper Islamic action. Inshallah, when we see that, no amount of propaganda will prevent the nur of Islam from reaching its perfection and completion.
There was a question that was asked, and I think this is in response to Sayyid Adwan's presentation, and it refers to a specific point that you had made. It says, when a man marries an Ahl Kitab woman, at what point in time must the woman convert to Islam, especially since you stated that a strong foundation in Islam is paramount? So if we'd like to clarify,
So the fiqh aspect of it?
sure, I guess that's what they're asking. And if you'd like to elaborate on that, that's fine.
Okay, so obviously the reason that example was given is to understand the relationship between husband and wife and how that is very important in the upbringing of the child. Even if it's a marriage between a Shia and a Sunni, that could also be very detrimental, and it could be dividing aspect in the growth of the child. Well, in the beginning, when they're getting married, they say, well, no, we're very open about it, this and that, but when the child is growing up, which direction are they going to go? You understand the differences even in the method of performing, for example, a wudu or prayer, or the attendance of, azadari. All those things could be, when there's a marriage between Shia and Sunni, let alone when there's a marriage between a Muslim man and Ahl Kitab woman. First of all, it's only the temporary nature that is permissible according to the jurists. Vice versa is not permissible, which means a Muslimah woman and a non-Muslim, even Ahl Kitab man. According to my, knowledge, but I'm sure the ulama over here will clarify it if I'm wrong. And so it's only the temporary nature which is allowed, and person has to be converted for a permanent marriage to be established between a Muslim man and obviously Ahl Kitab who then wishes to convert. But the main reason was, the example was of you're not marrying just for each other. There's a future generation and progeny, and that's what we're discussing, the future generations of Muslims in America. That what will they grow up to be? So when they're lacking identity from the very beginning, how will they be able to carry themselves as they grow older.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to ask, yes.
I would appreciate if each one of you in the podium briefly tell me how tolerant you are to the people that keep talking when you are giving a lecture, and the kids which are going up and down, or the people that constantly are playing on their telephone also. Should you stop them, or should you make any note, or say something to them, or just be tolerant?
In a setting like this, it's the moderator's duty. But if I'm giving a lecture or speaking in that, obviously it is disturbing. It could sometimes throw you off what you're about to speak and say. It could take your chains of thoughts away. And so, yeah, and it shows your interest in what I'm saying, that you're absolutely not interested in what I'm saying over here. And, so you're busy with your own gadgets. And yes, I understand sometimes it could be important, but especially the youngsters. So, yes, it is disheartening to see sometimes that. But, in Allah mas-sabirin.
So, one more question I would like to ask of. No, we're going to, inshallah, we're going to end with this last question. Yes, well, they gave it time for when the Qabli Pala will be ready, so we have. So, unfortunately, many Muslims as individuals, they've never known a member of the clergy on a personal level. So, a lot of people who have had their lives changed for the better is because of knowing one of the members of the clergy, not just because of their lectures, but because they've known them personally, and their character and their words of wisdom in a one-on-one setting has really changed, their outlook on life. So many Muslims don't know clergy, and many youth have never spent significant time with one, and as a result, a lot of people think that the clergy, they kind of exist outside the community, kind of like as monks or ascetics, and that they're not familiar with everyday life. So what can be done to dispel these misconceptions that people may have about the lifestyle of the clergy and what kind of people they are?
Usage of clergies in our society and community is part-time. If it becomes full-time, they will become familiar and friend, and the problem will be resolved soon.
Can you please explain what you mean the difference between part-time and full-time?
It means we rarely invite an alim for 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, a year. He is not involved in the life of society. If he is a resident alim, full-fledged resident alim, and we do not have a dead Islamic center, which opens only once a week or once a month, then involvement will change the community and will change the youth, and the terms will be established in better way.
This is actually, if we put all of the discussion up until this point, other than the Qabli Falau aside, this is probably the most important beneficial statement that we came across, and may Allah increase the tawfiqat and life and health and well-being of Hajj Sayyid Atiq Abadi for mentioning that. If I recall correctly, it's advice of our 11th Imam, Imam Askari alayhi salam, where one of his advice to us is that we all should pick a guide, a scholar to be friends with on a personal level. And as Maulana mentioned, unfortunately, the access to such people is very scarce nowadays, but as we work to improve these situations and fill the voids, one of the things that we should keep is that find someone that your personality gets along with, who's a scholar, and they can increase our knowledge, increase our guidance, and bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very important to develop that friendship, at least with one. If we have more, even better. The more the merrier, as they say. So that is very important, number one. Number two, we imagine that our scholars are off limit, or their responsibility is on the mimbar and inside the masjid. And as Maulana was saying, that no, it's a full-time job. You might go to work 9 to 5 and come home, but the ulama, they're working 24/7. The phone is ringing, the emails are coming, people are waking you up in the middle of the night, early in the morning. There's an issue with my child, we're having marital issues, someone passed away, this and that. So it's a 24/7 job, this is. And the ulama, generally speaking, are very friendly and very approachable. And even if they seem that they're not, right off the bat, but as we get to know them a little better and so forth, we will understand that they are, and nothing, I think, will benefit us more. Not the religious centers, not religious institutions, religious education, as that, than a personal, close relationship with a righteous scholar.
There's a final question that came in. If one of the respected ulama could please quickly answer this question. It's very important. It says, what should one do if he meets many bad clergies of Islam and thinks that most of the clergy are therefore bad? What should a person do in this situation?
I apologize. It seems like they're throwing everything on me. We're all struggling. There's only one ma'asum in the world today, and that's Imam al-Hujjah. Well, let me correct that. There's Nabi Khidr as well. So, but namely speaking, there's Imam al-Hujjah, Ajalallah ta'ala farjahu. So if you go from the Maraji down to the first year students, everyone has issues. Of course, Allah doesn't want us to be perfect from the start. If that was the case, He would have made us such. He wants us to improve. So it's very possible that we see some bad scholars today, and then so-called, and then tomorrow, they're the awliya of Allah. It's very possible that you see a wali of Allah today, and tomorrow they're best friends with shaitan. So it's always a struggle. But like anything, in every field, there's good people, there's bad people, there's people there to take advantage of it. Any field, it's humanity. So if we see it like that and we approach that, then seeing bad people in certain fields, of course it has more impact when it's in the scholarship, Islamic scholarship. It should not turn us off to the good ones that are out there, and there are definitely good ones out there. And a lot of times we have misconceptions too. So it's human nature. When a person is in the limelight, their actions are placed under a microscope and they're the topic of gossip. Right or wrong, truth or false, it doesn't matter. So it requires that we should be able to navigate through all of these things and not just see everything black and white from the start. We might imagine a situation or a person being bad, but in reality they're not. We might imagine them to be good, in reality they're not. And that holds true with everything in life.
I'd ask my philosopher Hussein to give a closing statement for today, and then inshallah we'll have the
Let me thank Hujjaj Islam Mawalina scholars, especially Haj Sayyid Atiqullah Ibadi. May Allah give him long life, and may Allah rest the souls of his father and deceased one. May Allah give good capability to Haji Sayyid Baqir Imrani. May Allah rest the soul of his father and all deceased of the family. Also, I pray for Haj Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi. May Allah extend his life with wealth and health. And Sheikh Ali Raza Alawi. Also, our younger brother, he has showed up now, Maulana Kalbi Abbas Rizvi. May Allah give him long life, and may Allah give you all long life. It was very beautiful event, mashallah. I myself learned a lot from all of your experiences. I will urge all of you to encourage your ulama. As Haji Bakr said, they are not innocent, but they are trying their best to serve you. We should not spread rumors against our ulama. Of course, all of them cannot be equal and cannot be okay and cannot be good. We have bad and good. What I have learned from Iran is Iranian people, they do not blame their alim. Although they know some of the alim is not good, some of the ulama is not good, they don't blame him. But they give him some kind of lesson. I believe this is more than enough. Encourage your institute of clergies. Inshallah, this will help you to guide yourself and your children, and you won't face these problems if your institute is strong. May Allah bless you all. The event went very well, and the conclusion is we are supposed to cooperate, coordinate, help each other, and we are supposed to think positively. And inshallah, we all will coordinate, cooperate, and will get our goal by the blessing of Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Had, Ya Had, Ya Had, Ya Wahid, Ya Wahid, Ya Wahid. Ya Mawjood, Ya Mawjood, Ya Mawjood. Ya Jawad, Ya Jawad, Ya Jawad. Ya Basit, Ya Basit, Ya Basit. Ya Kareem, Ya Kareem, Ya Kareem. Ya Wahhab, Ya Wahhab, Ya Wahhab. Ya Dattal, Ya Dattal, Ya Dattal. Ya Ghani, Ya Ghani, Ya Ghani. Ya Mughni, Ya Mughni, Ya Mughni. Ya Fattah, Ya Fattah, Ya Fattah. Ya Raziq, Ya Raziq, Ya Raziq. Ya Alim, Ya Alim, Ya Alim. Ya Hakim, Ya Hakim, Ya Hakim. Ya Hayy, Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayy, Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayy, Ya Qayyum. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim. Allahumma inni atawajjahu ilayka بنبيك نبي الرحمة صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأهل بيته عليهم الصلاة والسلام الذين اخترتهم على علم على العالمين اللهم لين لي صعوبتها ورذونتها واكفني شرها فإنك الكعفي المعفي والغالب القاهر. پروردگار تیری بارگاہ میں ہم دعا گو ہیں کہ عظیم الشان اس جلسے کو قبول مقبول فرما. علماء کرام کا سایہ قوم کو پر باقی رکھ. جو حضرات خدمت دین خدمت خلق انجام دے رہے ہیں ان کو اجر اجزل عنایت فرما. تجھے اہل بیت اطہار کا واسطہ تمام حاضرین ناظرین جالسین مستمعین مشارکین مشترکین کی تمام دعاؤں کو مستجاب فرما لے. پروردگار تجھے واسطہ اہل بیت اطہار کا ہے جو مریض یا مریضہ ہیں ان کو شفاء عاجلہ و کاملہ عنایت فرما. ہم سب کو بلیات عرضی و سماوی سے مامون و محفوظ فرما. پروردگار تجھے واسطہ اہل بیت اطہار کا ہے خصوصی طور پر ماہ محرم قریب ہے اور اس میں وہ ایکچول میسیجز جو اہل بیت اطہار کے خصوصی طور پر امام حسین کے جو میسیجز ہیں صحیح معنوں میں ریئل اسلام ایکچول اسلام ہم سب کو پہنچانے کی توفیق عنایت فرما. پالنے والے طاغوت و طغات و بغات اپنی کوشش و کاوش و معاملہ کر رہے ہیں دین کے خلاف شریعت کے خلاف ان کو نیست و نابود فرما. پالنے والے صحیح اسلام کو صحیح اسلام کے فیض کو اور اسلامی ह्यूमैनिटी जो इस्लाम ने मोरलिटी को पेश किया उस सबको हम सबको पेश करने की तौफीक इनायत फरमा और हम सबको इस लायक बना दे कि जब हुज्जत खुदा का ज़हूर हो मौला हम सबको अपने नासिर व मददगार में शुमार कर लें। एक मरतबा सूरह हम्द और 3 मरतबा सूरह तौहीद की तिलावत फरमा कर तमाम मरहूमिन व मरहूमात खुसूसी तौर पर मराजे किराम जो इस दुनिया से चले गए या जो हज़रात जिनका इस दुनिया में कोई सूरह फातिहा पढ़ने वाला नहीं उन सब की अरवाह को ईसाल फरमा दें।
أحسنت جزاك الله سيدنا منا منكم إن شاء الله الله يتقبل الله يطول عمرك إن شاء الله مشكورين.
Inshallah, we would like to end our program with the recitation of ziyarat by our brother Hussein.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا خير خلق الله، السلام عليك أيها البشير النذير والسراج المنير، الطهر الطاهر والدر الفاخر والعلم الزاهر، المنصور المؤيد والرسول المسدد، المصطفى الأمجد حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم السلام عليك وعلى أخيك أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين ويعصوب الدين إمام المتقين سد الله الغالب مولانا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك وعلى ابنتك وبضعتك الصديقة الكبرى فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي وسيدة نساء العالمين من الأولين والآخرين. السلام عليك وعلى زوجتك خديجة، السلام عليك وعلى أمك آمنة، السلام عليك وعلى أبيك عبد الله، السلام عليك وعلى جدك عبد المطلب، السلام عليك وعلى عمك أبي طالب، السلام عليك وعلى عمك الحمزة بن عبد المطلب، السلام عليك وعلى ابن عمك جعفر الطيار، السلام عليك وعلى ولديك وريحانتي الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. السلام عليك وعلى ابنتك الحمراء زينب، السلام عليك وعلى الأئمة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين زين العباد علي ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والخلف الحجة القائم المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل ظهوره ومخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومن الذابين عنه المسارعين إليه في قضاء حوائجه ومن الممتثلين لأوامره ومن السابقين